Right now, somewhere in the world, a person is losing their mind over a parking ticket. Meanwhile, history is absolutely packed with people who had their lives ended because they wore the wrong shoes, made accidental eye contact, or let their shadow drift a few inches in the wrong direction. Today, we're diving into 10 real-life executions so absurd they will make you wonder how the human race didn't go extinct centuries ago. These aren't urban legends or tall tales. Courts actually sat down, looked at the evidence, and decided these people had to die for the most ridiculous reasons imaginable. Let's get into it. Number 1. Thomas Cromwell, the ultimate catfish victim. Thomas Cromwell was the most powerful fixer in Tudor England. As King Henry VIII's right-hand man, he was the guy who could make any problem disappear. But his downfall didn't come from a political coup or a failed war. It came from a bad Tinder match. Well, the 16th century version of one. Cromwell arranged for Henry to marry Anne of Cleves based on a glowing, flattering portrait by Hans Holbein. He basically sold the king on a filtered profile picture. When Anne finally arrived in person, Henry was horrified. He famously called her a Flanders mare and claimed she looked nothing like the painting. He was so humiliated by being catfished that he turned his fury directly on the man who set it up. Cromwell was accused of treason and heresy, but everyone at court knew the truth. He was losing his head in 1540 because he gave the king a bad recommendation on a wife. In the world of Henry VIII, a misleading portrait wasn't just a social blunder, it was a capital offense. Number 2. Draco's War on Napping, Death for Laziness. Ancient Athens is celebrated as the cradle of democracy and philosophy, but in the 7th century BC, it was also the home of the most aggressive anti-laziness laws in history. A lawmaker named Draco, the man whose name gave us the word draconian, wrote a legal code where almost every single crime was punishable by death. His most infamous law? Making unemployment a capital crime. Under Draco's code, if you were caught being idle, meaning you didn't have a job or a visible way to support yourself, the sentence was execution. Not a fine, not community service, but the end of your life. Athenians essentially invented the death penalty for having a slow Tuesday. Legend says that when someone asked Draco why he made the punishment for laziness the same as the punishment for murder, he replied that laziness deserved death and he couldn't think of anything worse for the murderers. For a brief window in history, taking an afternoon nap in Athens was a high-stakes gamble with the Grim Reaper. Number 3. The Shadow Sentence, Death by Silhouette. In ancient Polynesia, specifically in places like Hawaii and Tahiti, chiefs weren't just political leaders, they were walking conduits of a divine force called mana. This sacred energy was so volatile that it was protected by strict laws called kapu. One of the most terrifyingly easy ways to break these laws involved the sun. If a commoner's shadow accidentally touched the shadow of a chief, it was considered a spiritual short circuit that defiled the chief's divinity. The punishment for this accidental overlap? Immediate execution. Imagine you're just walking down a path, minding your own business, when the sun shifts behind a palm tree. Your silhouette stretches out, grazes the chief's shadow for a split second, and boom, you've just committed a capital crime. There was no trial or "I didn't mean to" defense. Your shadow had committed treason, and your head was the price. It is perhaps the ultimate example of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, where the wrong place was literally anywhere near sunlight. Number 4. Admiral John Byng, executed for trying his best. Admiral John Byng was a British naval officer who, in 1756, failed to stop the French from taking the island of Minorca. Byng didn't flee like a coward. He engaged the French fleet, realized his ships were badly damaged, and decided that a tactical retreat was the only way to save his sailors and his fleet for a future battle. He chose logic over suicide. The British government, however, needed a scapegoat for the loss. Byng was court-martialed for failing to do his utmost against the enemy. Even though the court actually recommended mercy, King George II insisted on his execution. Byng was taken to the deck of his own ship and shot by a firing squad. The French philosopher Voltaire famously mocked the situation, saying the British killed their admirals from time to time to encourage the others. It remains a chilling reminder of a time when doing your best wasn't enough to keep you off the business end of a musket. Number 5. The eye contact treason, looking at the emperor. Qin Shi Huang, the man who first unified China, was a genius of administration and a total disaster of paranoia. He was so terrified of assassination that he created a palace environment that felt more like a horror movie. One of his strictest rules, it was illegal to look directly at the emperor. Not threaten him, not point at him, just making eye contact could get you killed on the spot. The logic was that only a potential assassin would have the nerve to gaze upon the divine ruler. As a result, every servant, minister, and guard spent their entire lives staring at their own feet. If you were carrying a heavy tray, tripped, and accidentally glanced up to steady yourself, you had effectively signed your own death warrant. The emperor's court was filled with people staring at the floor, terrified that a stray eyeball movement would be their last. It is perhaps the ultimate example of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, where the wrong place was literally anywhere near sunlight.
Number 6. The Great Tobacco Purge, smoking as a death wish. In 1634, Tsar Michael Romanov of Russia decided that tobacco wasn't just a health hazard, it was an insult to God and a threat to the state. He banned the devil's leaf entirely, and he didn't play around with the enforcement. If you were caught smoking or selling tobacco, you weren't given a ticket. You were tortured, had your nostrils slit open, or were simply executed. The Russian government feared that tobacco houses were places where people gathered to gossip and plot rebellions. For decades, having a quick smoke in Moscow was a legitimate death wish. It wasn't until Peter the Great came along years later that the government realized they could make more money by taxing smokers than by killing them. But until then, the Merchant of Death wasn't a cigarette company. It was the Tsar. Number 7. Drowning for bad beer. The ancient Babylonians' quality control. Ancient Babylonians took their happy hour very, very seriously. The Code of Hammurabi, one of the world's oldest sets of laws, had a very specific section regarding tavern keepers. If a bartender was caught watering down the beer or overcharging the customers, the punishment was poetic but brutal. The tavern keeper would be drowned. In some versions of the law, they were literally drowned in their own low-quality beer. The Babylonians valued the purity of their ale so much that defrauding a drinker was considered a crime against society on par with theft or assault. There were no satisfaction guaranteed stickers in Babylon, just the looming threat of the river if your beer wasn't up to code. It makes modern health inspections look like a trip to a theme park. Number 8. The posthumous execution, killing a dead man. Oliver Cromwell led the English Civil War, executed King Charles I, and ruled England as Lord Protector. He died of natural causes in 1558 and was given a massive, respectful funeral. But when the monarchy was restored a few years later, King Charles II wanted revenge, and he wasn't going to let a little thing like being dead stop him. In 1661, on the anniversary of his father's execution, Charles II ordered Cromwell's body to be dug up. The corpse was dragged through the streets of London, hanged at Tyburn Gallows, and then beheaded. The head was then stuck on a spike outside Westminster Hall, where it stayed for over 20 years. It is the ultimate act of political pettiness. The state literally spent time and money to execute a man who had been in the ground for 3 years. Cromwell learned the hard way that in the world of royal grudges, death is only a temporary setback for the executioner. Number 9. The Glasses Massacre, death by eyesight. When the Khmer Rouge took control of Cambodia in 1975, they attempted to reset society to year zero. Their goal was to destroy all intellectuals and anyone who might oppose their radical agrarian vision. Their method for identifying these dangerous thinkers was terrifyingly simple. They looked for people wearing glasses. The logic was that if you wore glasses, it meant you read books. If you read books, you were an educated intellectual and therefore an enemy of the state. Thousands of people were rounded up and executed simply because they had poor eyesight. Doctors, teachers, and students were slaughtered alongside anyone who just happened to be wearing corrective lenses. It is one of history's most chilling examples of how a simple physical necessity can be twisted into a death sentence by a paranoid regime. Number 10. The bagpipe weapon. Death by musical instrument. After the Jacobite uprising of 1745, the British government was on a mission to dismantle Scottish Highland culture. They banned kilts, tartans, and traditional music. In 1746, a man named James Reed was arrested for his role in the rebellion. Reed argued that he wasn't a soldier, he was just a bagpiper who hadn't actually fought anyone. The British court famously disagreed. They ruled that since a Highland regiment never marched into battle without a piper, the bagpipes were technically an instrument of war. This meant that in the eyes of the law, carrying a set of bagpipes was no different than carrying a loaded musket. James Reed was convicted of high treason and hanged. He is the only person in history officially executed for playing a musical instrument. It's a harsh reminder that when a government wants you gone, even your hobby can be classified as a lethal weapon. History is a long, messy, and often deeply stupid record of human behavior. From the catfished King of England to the weaponized bagpipes of Scotland, these 10 stories show that justice hasn't always been about truth. Sometimes it was just about ego, paranoia, or bad luck. It makes you realize that while we complain about our modern legal systems, at least we don't have to worry about being executed because our shadow touched the wrong person. But here is what I want to know. Pick one person from this list you'd bring back to life and one ruler you'd put on trial instead. Drop both names in the comments below. If this video made you grateful for 21st century laws, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the glitches of history. We'll see you in the next one.